Call the roll.
Councilmember Davis. Present. Councilmember Keel.
Here.
Councilmember Kerr.
Here.
Councilmember Parmet.
Here.
Councilmember Sullivan. Councilmember Thisted. Present. Mayor Riley.
Present.
There are 6 members present.
And I'd like to point out to the Councilmember Sullivan isn't here today. He's ill today. He was taking care of his 4-year-old granddaughter who brought home.
Knows what?
The day.
And so, I've determined, unless there's objection, that the absence is excused. And with that, before we go on with the remainder of the agenda, I'll turn the floor over to the town manager, who will discuss the last agenda item.
The last agenda item, and I had mentioned this last meeting, was that we'd be going over the first of our financial reports that we are doing with Marquetti, the outside financial firm. We did receive their first attempt at putting that all together for us until 5:59 last evening. And reviewing it today, it's just not ready to go. So I talked to Marquetti today and our account rep, Beth. Pointed out a few things. The mayor and I had a chance to go over some things just a few minutes ago. But when I got back to them, they I suggested we put off a meeting. They said, let's put off 2 meetings. The reason they want to do it in the April 24th meeting is that by that time we'll have they'll be able to close out the month of March financials, and then they can populate the report. Right now, there's a lot of zeros in the report. It really doesn't do a lot of good. But we will have a much more better ability to look at those reports later on with real numbers in there. And so for tonight, I'm suggesting that we take the town financial reports off the agenda.
Is there any objection? Done. With that, the first item on the agenda is adoption of land use and development guidelines. Now turn it over to our town plan community development director.
For the record, Mr. Yost. You got a lot of information in your packets. What this work session is specifically about is really chapter 11, which is community appearance. But let me back up just a bit. Your first reading of the land use and development code will be at your public meeting tonight. There was a tremendous amount of information that simply wasn't needed. And what I'd like to talk about a little bit tonight or this afternoon with you is specifically chapter 11. And I didn't feel, nor did the town attorney feel it was right to necessarily just take it out in its entirety. We would like your feedback with regards to that one chapter. We did take out quite a bit in the rest of the code that absolutely is just simply not applicable to the town's needs and zoning designations. So with that being said, my gut feeling with regards to chapter 11 is maybe the first portion of it could be applicable. But I'd like some feedback from council with regards to the noxious weeds section and how applicable that is. And a little bit of history on that. It made it into the land use and development code probably 15, 20 years ago as false chamomile. Let's just simplify it. It was running rampant, certainly in the lower blue and other portions of the county. I do not know how big of a deal it is in the town limits, so I didn't feel comfortable just suggesting that we just take it out. But let's move with regards to at least that portion, and maybe Jennifer can help me a little bit with regards to the enforcement powers of the rest of it. Is it with town ordinance, the first portion of chapter 11, are there other mechanisms available and thus maybe not needed in that portion? So,
What do you mean by other mechanisms available?
other enforcement actions, that can be utilized.
Yeah, certainly, the town can file a claim in district court for violation of ordinances, violations of provisions of your ordinances. So typically the way that these types of, I'll refer to these as nuisance type ordinances that, make weeds, tall grasses, some municipalities have junk inoperable vehicle regulations, stockpiling regulations. Those are typically enforced by a code enforcement officer, who can be with a building department contractor. You could hire a code enforcement officer, but those are typically enforced by code enforcement. The way that code enforcement generally works in most municipalities is there's education first, request for compliance. You have this vehicle out here, it's not lawful under our municipal code because it's not operable. And so you need to either remove it from your property, you need to get it repaired, or you need to store it in your garage. If the property owner doesn't take those steps, then the code enforcement officer then can write a ticket into municipal court for a violation. Because we don't have that right now, we don't have that enforcement piece. One thing that you could do is just, we could send letters, we could have somebody go out there. Probably depends on the situation, and you could, if it's not resolved, file a claim in district court. These cases aren't usually handled in district court. District court is not really going to know what to do with it, but that's an option.
The only thing I would add is, my experience with the county is code enforcement is very effective, and just as Jennifer suggested, a series of letters and documentation is crucial to these things. But those things take some time. The sheriff's office, depending on the type of violation, will be involved or not. Again, it depends on the type of nuisance. But with that being said, most of the violations have a tendency to not have to go to district court.
But it can't be a violation if there's no code, right?
That is correct. But you would have to fall back on other statutes, I guess.
Yeah, for extreme situations, that would be a public nuisance. You could argue that, and a public nuisance is, something egregious like toxic chemicals or something like that. But generally, there are no state laws prohibiting these types of behavior, this type of appearance or maintenance of property.
So I'm trying to understand this because I don't feel like an expert in any of it or even a novice. Would this be the section where we would also have something related to abandoned vehicles or excessive vehicles? And my concern with all of this is that because I don't feel completely competent in assessing whether or not these cover all of the needs of Keystone and understanding what it would take to add them in if something came to our attention that needed to be included in the ordinances, I want to make sure that we're taking this with the amount of time and consideration it deserves. So typically in my experience, these types
for municipalities, these types of ordinances, these types of regulations are not in the land development code. They're in a separate section. What you have here from Summit County is actually pretty slim.
Yeah.
In terms of regulations, there's not much here. And certainly you can add more. And you can, and there's different things that you can regulate. There is, at some point in time, you're gonna need to adopt building code regulations. And likely the building code regulations that you're gonna be adopting are through the ICC, which is International Code, something, I'm forgetting the last C. But those are your building codes, those are your international building code, your residential code, plumbing code. You can adopt, and so you can also adopt the International Property Maintenance Code, which is an ICC code. And that speaks to regulations related to the exterior structure after a building is built, how is the building maintained, grading and drainage outside of your structures, how is that maintained? That might be more than you want to get into. Then you can also think about adopting your typical nuisance violations, which would be like weeds, tall people who don't mow their lawns, have huge grasses, and your junk vehicles, stockpiling, those types of things. And those are typically, separate sections from the land development code.
But what you're saying is that normally the nuisance items that we see in land development code the county has are normally handled as separate ordinances in another part of the town's municipal code.
Yeah, I mean, most times, they're in chapter 7. That's where you find them in most municipalities, is chapter 7, that's your nuisance codes. And they're just separate from your land use, because they're not part of your land use and development. I mean, I guess you can make an argument that they are land use, but they're really just upkeep and maintenance and not being a bad neighbor.
Where does something like excessive dog barking fall? Because we need that.
Though that would be, yeah, I mean, that's your animal regulation.
Does that,
No, that's, yeah.
I'm just trying to make sure that we're covering all of our bases, because if you would clarify for me, what is the process for changing this once we adopt it? Does it have to go to a vote or?
Well, so if you decide, say, for example, right now, you say, this is something that we want to look at a little bit more seriously. We want to maybe expand on the nuisances that we have here. So we're not going to include this chapter 11. What I would recommend is at a later date to ask us to come back, another work session and provide you with sample codes that you could look at and decide what type of issues you do want to regulate as the municipality. And then it wouldn't even be in this land development code. It would live a separate place.
Nice clarification. So I see in the background here that it says, a public nuisance is defined by the code as a building deteriorated, whatever. So is my understanding that based on what I read under chapter 11, that it's only for not occupied buildings? Isn't that what it says in the code? So I guess I'm confused as to what the point is. If it doesn't even discuss occupied buildings, because when I went back and read it, it said any dilapidated building, except for a building identified by the county as having historical value, which is unused by the owner or uninhabited. So does this not even apply to occupied buildings, which I would say is pretty much all of our buildings?
It does.
I can help with that.
Yeah.
So that portion, that specific portion was designed for, properties or structures that have been vacated. I can think of only one in the town limits right now. And again, everything revolves around the health, safety, welfare. Where, for instance, a building is not necessarily abandoned, where you would go is the building code for health, safety, welfare. Say there's a plumbing or electrical issue that poses a threat. We would go at that using a different code, the building code. But what you're reading is in the event that something is dilapidated and poses a threat, public health, safety, welfare threat to the public. No, you don't have that. I can't think of one area maybe in the town that it could be applicable, but it's not.
So, I mean, we have a lot of aging buildings, obviously, in the county, and we have a lot of buildings that need exterior maintenance and repair. All of those wouldn't fall under a nuisance code, it would fall under, an IUC code, it would fall under building code. Is that what I'm reading? Or how would I
Well, there. Now, what you're talking about, like paint and things like that, that's community appearance, and that is more what we're talking about with regards to, what you're looking at.
So should that not be amended to include that, or is that overreaching?
That could be in, that's that international property maintenance code that I'm talking about.
Okay.
That could be included in there. That's something.
But it wouldn't reach that nuisance line.
Yeah, I mean, and that code actually speaks to dangerous buildings where you don't have water connected, you don't have electricity
Yeah,
connected.
you got gutters falling off, I'm
It does.
imagining lots of various situations.
It does speak to that, and the question is whether you want to get into that area and whether you want to be enforcing those types of issues.
So what are we looking to clarify for the purpose of this meeting, for this, what are we?
But
You
Lindsay
question
and I
it's just
use
me.
it like direction as to whether the town council would like this provision included right now in your land development code, so that beginning May 9th, you can start enforcing on this code. Will you enforce on it May 9th? Probably not.
And then at a later date, we would be able to dive deeper into
Yeah.
what we want these nuisance codes to be like, or additional codes.
Yep.
Is that?
As I'm understanding this, then if we were to eliminate section, then the existing county requirements for noxious weeds, dilapidated buildings, and I think there was a third one.
Rubbish.
Rubbish, would no longer apply anywhere in Keystone. And if someone had a dumpster and decided they wanted to refurbish their house, they could just pile it all in the front yard and there would be nothing to prevent it. But by keeping it in right now, until we get to a later stage, we want to address all of the nuisances. You've maintained the existing status quo county has. And then we have an opportunity to address it later, and then we can come back and amend the land use code and pull it out of the land use and put it in the other area.
And what would be the timeline for when we would actually be establishing a more substantial?
Yeah, how do we earmark that to make sure that we
It's not overlooked.
and that doesn't get overlooked?
I think I got it. So, basically what you see that Jennifer, Bob, and I did with the development code, for first review. That's the foundation. We will always have the ability to amend. I suggested leaving in portions that may or may not be applicable. This being one of them, TDRs might be another. I plan on coming back to council with a punch list, big ticket items for maybe the next round. But again, the intent today and tonight was really to get a feel from the council on how they feel for these things. And two, to get a code in place so we can, on May 9th, serve the public and have our own code to enforce.
And that doesn't
And
necessarily,
enforce.
and that doesn't necessarily mean we have to be going out and looking for violations, but it gives us the option, if we kept it in, to enforce something, if there was something egregious out there as we're going to.
That is correct, and Keystone has a good track record with regards to the public letting us know. Informing staff that there's a problem out there.
Sure.
When I read this 4 or 5 times, the first two seemed pretty compelling. They're about safety, public health, threat to people. So I support this idea of keeping this in, those first two in, about the buildings that are dangerous and the rubbish. From a public health perspective, the noxious weeds is problematic though, because, first of all, it suggests that it's the landowner's knowing decision to allow them is the problem, where with all the second homeowners, that would mean we'd have to take on some education campaign. And then it says the enforcement is big. The homeowners, the landowners are encouraged to work with the weed department when contacted. So is that their expense, our expense? My point is back to where Lindsay started. Without enforcement options in place now, we might want to pump that one down the road. And we might want to add that when we do what Jennifer had suggested.
Yeah, and a little bit off of that, I'm also wondering how, all of our condo associations handle,
They're all in
it's all.
violation right now, I will tell you that.
You have so many owners, and then you've got different property management companies, I can see it becoming a cluster.
In the case of a condo association, it isn't an owner, it's a condo association. So you're dealing with one entity versus the Pines. If the Pines had noxious weeds,
My hand was up, we need to discuss this.
yeah. And by association, I assume there are some as well, that you would be dealing with them if you chose to strictly enforce. The county obviously hasn't chosen in the past to strictly enforce, but it gives you the option to. Is that fair to say? And we do have a requirement from a town standpoint, on the roads maintenance standpoint, to have noxious weed program to knock them down in the town right of ways. So, and we have funding for that from the GOCO funding, that will help fund them.
Just a very brief
Yeah.
example and an information point of what homeowners can do is you simply call the county and say like, hey, I need to do some spraying. They say, can you come pick up a pack? You pick up a weed spraying pack, it's loaded, you go and spray your property, you can turn it back in, there's no cost.
Well, that's some education that has not happened then.
My experience in other towns is that if you have noxious weeds, you're expected to purchase the chemicals that would be required to knock them down or dig them out or whatever it is to take care of it.
Being a neighbor of the river course, I spend a lot of Sunday afternoons cleaning up noxious weeds off of the river course because they blow onto my property. And particularly this earth. I mean, they will let them grow taller than I am. And so I don't care where we put it, but I think we need to address it. And KOA is going to do some education with their member HOAs this spring. Middle of the winter didn't seem like a good time. There aren't very many noxious weeds growing. The other thing I wanted to add is, because I have a very large parking lot, we've had 2 cars and two trailers, one with two brand new snowmobiles abandoned on our property. So that is something that also needs to be addressed.
I'll take those.
Okay, well, this was years ago. Shocking.
No, that's no worries.
And where did we address that, Lindsay?
Great question. There's a portion in chapter 3 that we kept to address those very issues. Abandonment, how was it, it's under the vehicle storage portion that is still in the code.
Ooh, may I continue? We actually put a definition for an abandoned vehicle on our property into our parking policies. So we could get rid of them if they've been hanging around too long.
Again, what you're talking about is your HOA enforcement. I have no
Right.
regulatory authority over your HOA documents. With that being
I
said,
think it's a suggestion, not.
chapter 15 of the code that you are in part, adopting has a definition for abandonment.
Good.
I heard Carol suggest that we strike the noxious weeds from this. Growing up in Colorado, coming from an agricultural background, I would strongly object to that. Knowing the danger that noxious weeds pose to not only our environment, but our economy. Regardless of whether or not we have a means of enforcing it right now, this needs to stay in.
I recognize the concern that, do we want rules on the books that we can enforce? I definitely recognize that. I do think that you can set expectations of community before you're able to pick up the hammer when they're not met. So I see your point for sure, but I'm not convinced to remove them.
Well, I appreciate that thought, because I think it's a general policy. Don't want to create policies that we don't intend to enforce, but we are in that interim period. I get that. So the question then is, if we are going to maintain all that, do we want to work in the issues that have already come out of this body?
My recommendation is no, and the reason is we're dealing with May 9th. We have to, we're having first reading of the ordinance on tonight. And on March and April 22nd, or 23rd, is the final ordinance, and that ordinance must be adopted by that meeting, or we cannot transition plan. So my recommendation is you would come back and address all of those other issues in a separate nuisance section, and eventually you would pull the stuff out of the land use and put it where most towns have it, which would be in, I guess, section 7 of the municipal code. And that would probably be, the timing for that all depends on the other transition in ordinance action, probably late summer, probably.
Yeah, we can do it late summer, it's really, it's
Summer,
up
late
to
summer.
all of you of what's your priority and where you want things to fall, but yeah. Definitely come back late summer with topic areas, that you can regulate in that section.
And I think that if we have a firm idea of when we're gonna relook it and have the enforcement, what is the enforcement besides, do we have to have a code enforcement officer to do that? Is there another
That's budget.
instrument? Is it contracted, part-time,
County has code enforcement. Just like it,
for the town, it's budgeted?
it's the town's budget for next year. But the budget is a half-time person.
That's right, it's part-time.
So that's my concern, but if we want to delve in, we can. Subject to council.
Clarification.
do I understand that your recommendation is we leave in these in for now? And then later on, pull them down and put them in chapter 7?
Yes,
Okay.
And we don't have a chapter 7 yet because the code isn't codified, but that's just the way that my brain thinks and
Per chapter 7.
yeah.
it'd be a separate, it would talk about all the nuisances that the town wants to control. I don't know if animal control will be in that same section or not.
Typically, it's in chapter 7.
Which I think is really important, especially given how diverse our community is with the resort residences, businesses. I think that's going to take a lot of consideration,
Yes.
specific to our community.
And I think it's going to take a lot of public discussion with that as well. I know I've already received one email regarding animal control, from a resident that's, wants that high on our agenda. So, that's something that, so that's another nuisance that would be in that same area. Leash laws, animals running loose, those sort of things.
Currently, that is operated right now, through the sheriff's department. It's a branch of the sheriff's office.
And
They're super effective.
yeah, and all of the towns also, participate and pay for that service from the sheriff's office, supporting the towns. Just,
Thank you for being patient with us while we try to figure out where everything goes behind the Jennifer and because
Tonight was just the first
Well, I like you.
on that revolution.
right,
But also just, the time to use for, if anybody has any questions on the ordinance that's on consent, because there won't be any questions on consent unless you bring it up. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
before we do that.
Yeah.
Is there, as I proposed, I'll ask, is there, can I get consensus that the guidance is keep the nuisance items in the package for now, and then we will go back later and readdress, probably later in the summer? Yes, all right. There's your guidance. Now we can go back to the,
I like that vote. That was good.
so now Jennifer asked a very good question. Does anyone have any comments or questions about the rest of the code? I know those are a little daunting to get to try to correlate that with the code. Valerie?
I do. I hope this is where this belongs because I know there are multiple ordinances. So you're asking in general about all the proposed ordinances on the consent agenda or the one?
No, land use.
Okay, so not planning zone.
Yes, planning zone. That's the planning zone.
Well, that one will have the public hearing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I should want to tell you guys what my concern is.
On public hearing or,
Or, no, on ordinance 24-0-01 regarding prescribing the membership powers and duties and appointments.
That's going to be discussed.
So I just didn't bring that up. I'm like, okay, so-
you're talking about for the planning and zoning commission. That's
we're praying.
final consideration.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
So I should refrain.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Okay.
In the public hearing.
So we're just talking about this land use one.
Land
We're
use.
talking about the other two ordinances that are on that consent agenda as well.
Well, I'm suggesting land use because that's the general topic
Right.
that we have, that's on the work session. It's been
Right.
noticed on the agenda.
So for right now, for land, let's keep it to land use for now, then if we want to go to something else, we'll check. Carol?
About land use. So you made a number of recommendations, things that will, obviously the name changes are obvious. There's a number of things that you have, deleted. And I wonder if you could spend some time explaining, characterizing how you decided what to keep or what to reject. Something more than it didn't seem pertinent.
So, great question. I will say it was a bit daunting to take that document and go, all right, not needed, not needed, not needed, needed. So what I did, and where I started was, from a very simple perspective. Within the town limits, there are, how many, 13-ish zoning districts. Well, the code has probably double that. So right there, you don't need that. So every reference to something that is not within the town limits, that's where I started. Go get rid of that. You know, it's not applicable. Zoning designation of RU. You don't have any RU in the town limits.
What is RU?
Well, I knew you were gonna do that. Residential something, and it's 2 to 5 acres. You don't have it. There's nothing zoned. It's larger lot subdivisions, of 2 to 5 acres is my recollection. Maybe I could be wrong.
Another, well,
You don't have it. Mine would be a better example. Yes, Gary. You do not have any properties in the town limits zoned M1, which is mine. Like Climax, you do not have a Climax property. So obviously all the references to M1 out. So that's where I started. And that was the easy part. But then it got a little bit more complicated with regards to other types of uses. Wow, does the town have this? Does it not have it? And so I took a pretty conservative approach with regards to that. And I kept things at the maybes. Again, we can go back. There's always the ability to go back. But I didn't want to take something out that might be needed. There is stuff in there, I will say, that likely is not needed and we can get at a later date. Again, my intent was to give you a foundation of which, you know, the phone rings, can I have this? Can I do this? And that I need to get it up and running, and this document as proposed and as amended will allow me to do that. Carol, is there more to that one? If there was.
No.
Okay.
yeah, you know, another example that I saw that stuck out, first, there's a provision, there's a zoning in there to accommodate ranches, for instance.
Yes.
I remember.
Yes.
There's, in fact, I remember one item that ended up being deleted, I believe, had to do with Duke ranches.
Yeah, the Duke Ranch.
Yes. We don't need a definition nor regulations related to due branches. In fact, I'm not convinced the county does either, to be honest with you, but, you know, that's their issue. So, yeah, I took out what absolutely adamantly did not, isn't needed. And there was quite a bit of it. I'm excited to see how much we actually deleted as far as pages. I only have the digital, so I haven't done that. But it was a good, honest attempt to simplify what is not needed. And I need to let council know that the assistance and support that I got from the legal was over the top. Bob and Jennifer were amazing with you guys assisting with that. So thank you. Yeah.
I just want to clarify, I'm sorry to belabor the point, but when we say we can go back and address it, it's not going to require something that we present to the town and get voted on to
No.
change your planning and zoning code. It's more efficient.
It's an ordinance.
Okay,
You just have another ordinance.
I just want to make sure because I just needed to.
Could I do some education on, the way that this code is being adopted? This code is the Summit County, the town of Keystone is getting a land use and development code by adopting Summit County's land use and development code by reference. So you all, it sounds like went on to the website to take a look at Summit County's code. What this document is this document, the ordinance and the code and Summit County's code are gonna live together. We are not going to put together a code that is just Keystone's code where these things are stricken out. They're gonna live together. So anybody is first gonna go to the Summit County code to take a look at what's there. And then they're gonna have to go to our ordinance and see, okay, was that amended? Was it stricken out? So the two pieces are gonna have to be read together. And just one more piece, when codes are adopted by reference, state law provides that there's a different process because of the fact that you are taking something that's not yours and you're making it yours, just like adopting the building codes. So what happens is state law requires that you introduce the ordinance at first, and then you have to set a public hearing on that ordinance. And before the public hearing, you are required to publish 2 times in the newspaper, 15 days before the public hearing, 8 days before the public hearing, and say, we, Town of Keystone, is considering adopting this code that's not ours. And you can take a look at it in the clerk's office. And so that's why this ordinance is on the agenda tonight, is because because of timing, we needed those 15 days and 8 days before that last meeting in April to make this effective.
Very good. I'm sorry you looked, I spent a lot of time looking this stuff up. I did not look this one up. So if you wouldn't mind explaining, we deleted in its entirety, the wildfire hazard area, maybe, I don't know what a wildfire hazard area is.
Basically, it developed out of a program, well, probably the Forest Service. But basically what the intent was is to give a mechanism for new subdivisions, when we review new subdivision, to do certain prescriptive cuts and mitigation measures that would not preclude you necessarily from pre-existing subdivisions, but that is a little bit more complicated. But the intent of it really was for subdivisions. I don't anticipate you having any brand new subdivisions in the near future, but that's where it originated from.
So if I'm understanding that, you're specifically recommending that we don't need it because it was designed for new developments and we're not saying new development.
I am thinking that when we adopt a new ordinance that addresses nuisances, maybe we could put something in there to address that issue.
I'd love to have a fire address them.
I don't disagree at all, that you could put it in nuisances, but why not also just let it stand in there in case at some point we do need,
We very easily did. It could remain. It's been mostly utilized with subdivision review.
okay.
Do we have, Sarah?
Well, now I have 2 questions. Now I have an additional question. So what, I guess my question is, if the town was to purchase, say, this lot, and we were going to build a workforce housing, does that not constitute a subdivision build out? That would then fall under that category, we'd be missing it?
That's a great question. No, just the outright purchase would not be a subdivision. If you were to break this property into different pieces, or say, hypothetically, affordable housing or some other use
Right.
on this property, and we want to convey property to another owner or structure it differently, then yes. We probably will, yeah, down the road, maybe, based on need and direction from council and planning commission for that matter, and the master plan, it certainly is possible in the future. So again, it was one of those that I didn't foresee needing immediately. And I was my attempt was to certainly make it more usable for what we need right now. No harm, no foul, if you want to keep it there.
Is this where like dead stand, fetal pill would be addressed if people, like in my neighborhood where the lots are big and we have lots of timber, and if I had a neighbor who wasn't responsibly, I don't have a neighbor who's doing this, but if I had a neighbor who wasn't responsibly addressing their dead stand and fetal pill, where would that ordinance come to play? Because that could be an issue for fire hazard for people.
Exactly. It's somewhat of a complicated question, but again, I foresee that being as a nuisance issue. But with that being said, say your neighbor had an undeveloped piece of property, and say your neighbor came in for a building permit. To a very large extent, all those issues with regards to fire mitigation on that property would be mitigated.
And we're already built out, but we have such substantial lots that unless we have responsible neighbors, I've had to call a neighbor and say, hey, you have 6 trees that look like they're about to fall destruction across the river. And they're all very responsive, but if they weren't responsive, I would just want to make sure we have an ordinance that would compel them to take care of the stand.
I foresee it in the future, yes, but with that being said, there could be some degree of obligation from the HOA to deal with it. But
Exactly.
I didn't enjoy saying that.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Sure.
So my initial question, Jennifer, before we got distracted, before I got distracted, yes. Because we're adopting this by reference, does that eliminate our ability to develop our own like Unicode system? Or can we still publish in that fashion, even though it's somebody else's initial thought?
Yeah, so, really good question. Oftentimes municipalities adopt by reference other codes. And there's 2 areas where it's often done. Building codes, all building codes are typically adopted by reference where the municipality is adopting the international ICC codes. And then the other area is your model traffic codes. And both of those, what happens is they'll still live in your code book. Building codes are in chapter 18. And you have, you'll say in your code, it says that the town of Keystone adopts the international building code. And you will have amendments, just like we have here. You'll have, and then your next section will be amendments to the code. And you'll probably have a penalty section. So it'll be in your municipal code. And then also in a separate document, it needs to be referenced.
Okay, because we're looking at this in ordinance form, and I'm just trying to envision, is it going to be in a more user-friendly?
Yeah, this is what it would look like in your code book.
But it would be adopted to some sort of Unicode system that would make it user-friendly for our citizens.
Yeah, yep.
Let me ask a question, Lindsay. Is your intent after the transition has been completed and you can actually see the surface of the water over your head, is your intent then to go back, as you alluded to, and address this and eventually get us to our own town code?
Yes.
Any idea what kind of a timeline you'd be looking at for that?
Absolutely not.
And I'm looking at it from the standpoint of, are we looking at it, in 5 years? Are we looking at it in 1 year?
It's a great question. Again, I plan on coming back once we get the bare bones in place, is come back to council, maybe even planning commission, and get kind of a wish list, a priority list of big ticket items that absolutely need to be refined or better to fit our needs as far as the town. So I foresee in the next 6 months, at least getting the list going, prioritizing that list and coming to council with those potential amendments. Are you ever gonna have the perfect code? No. Codes are always going to be amended. So that's kind of my answer. I would hope to get something that better fits the town of Keystone within the next 2 years. That would be my goal. But again, contingent on other priorities set by council.
That answer the question, Jennifer?
And just to add on to this and piggyback, and I think this is what Lindsay had talked about in the work session last time, is that typically you do a comprehensive plan. And then you would update your land development code based on that comprehensive plan. Where do you see Keystone in 10 years? And what do you need for your land uses, and your regulations based on that 10-year plan?
Carol?
Are you suggesting we would do the comprehensive plan before we address the land use?
Well, your comprehensive plan would address land use issues.
Yeah, I'm thinking they would be hand in hand.
They do, they go hand in hand, but the plan is usually written, that comp plan is usually written, and then your land development code comes out of that big picture document.
For existing towns, they will update the comprehensive plan. So what I think I'm hearing you say, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you have usually towns have, both of them are existing. You update your comprehensive plan. And then that necessitates changes to your land development code. In our case, we're starting with 0. So we're temporarily, we're adopting the existing county code. Lindsay will come back later this year with some suggestions for guidance on changes to more tailor that to Keystone. And then next year, we'll be looking at the comprehensive plan. And then out of that, we'll probably come back and complete relook at land development code and the rewrite of land development code in the line of what a Keystone code is. Is that?
That is a very good likelihood. Yes. That's probably the way it's going to go.
Carol?
So if I can echo what I heard, thank you. We are gonna address the land use code over the next year.
You're going to also just go.
The comprehensive plan. Okay, the comprehensive plan itself will take on that big project next year, and that's what, 1.5 to 2 years of development. And that may or may not drive additional changes.
How long is the comprehensive plan?
Yeah.
It depends. I would foresee, quite frankly, not less than 6 months, probably 9 to 12 months is my guess. Now, with that being all said, if there's something urgent that needs to be addressed, we can do that.
Okay.
We can absolutely do that. So don't worry. What we are trying to get in place is not set in stone. It just gives us the foundation on which to build and amend.
Carol?
Sorry, me again. So thank you. That's good. I knew that the comprehensive plans could take some time, so we're not waiting. We'll be doing things together. But my secondary question is to give you credit for the work that you added. So I asked about the things that you pulled out, but I've also seen that you added information about floodplain protection, wetland land protection, and what's the other one, the grading. I'm assuming you see these more appropriate for our town and or filling a gap that you sense?
Carol, thank you. I would love to take credit. I can't. Bob and Jennifer really did the lion's share of all that. Because they have a better more references to draw from that are more applicable to the town's needs than what the county had.
Okay,
I know, well, certainly through some correspondence with Bob, he pulled from other resources.
okay.
Then again, work better for the town's needs. So I'd like to take credit that that really does not mean.
I'm sorry to agree the part about the wetlands, but because that can of worms has been open, I want to ask about that. Is that in response to the lack of protection for wetlands and our desire to have protection for the numerous wetlands in Keystone? Because I've been watching that at the state level.
It does provide protection for
Okay, because
wetland.
that was kind of rolled back in recent years and now some groups are trying to reinstate that. So
Yeah.
this allows us to put in our own protection.
It's in there. It's drafted in the code. What was done with these amendments is, just as Lindsay was saying, county has a ton of resources you just aren't gonna have as a brand new town. And a lot of processes that aren't really necessary for development in town. And so this is a more simplified approach really to managing these issues.
In the case of wetlands, having had some experience with the water district building, looking at building an office, an expansion of the water plant in the Lakeside Village, they were looking at an area, close to Highway 6, but the determination was they couldn't get past the wetlands, potential closeness to the wetlands and where the wetlands was in the area. So I believe, just based on that experience, that the county has done a pretty fair job of at least managing that wetlands interface from a county standpoint, which is beyond what the state and federals were doing, which is stripping some protection, but it had to do with different types of wetlands, I think, that we were specifically dealing with here. They were talking about different waterways and connection to the waterways.
I mean, it seems like they'll find a reason to build on anything. When they start building a national forest land, our wetlands are next.
Yeah. But I think there's some pretty good protections there.
There are, and then as Jennifer said, simplify
Yeah.
for the resources that we have. And again, just, I'm obligated to say this, the federal standards are still in place. But I believe that the amendments being proposed, are manageable by the town's resources, or we can, bridge that gap.
And one of the requirements that the town will have will be to develop a wetlands plan for submission to the state and federal government.
I believe that'll probably initiate with your master plan, look at it. But as of right now, it would be on a case by case basis.
Well, that's done by Roads and Bridges in County. Robert Jacobs.
Yeah, it falls under public works, of which engineering
Yeah.
is under that umbrella.
I want to point out one other thing in the, changes that Lindsay and Jennifer made in the, land use and development code, and that has to do with marijuana dispensaries. The existing county code had a requirement to be 50 feet from the nearest residential. Silverthorne and Dillon both have a 300-foot requirement for residential distancing, and they included the Dillon and Silverthorne requirements of 300 feet. So just from a full disclosure standpoint, that's in there, and that will change from the county code.
Thank you.
Other questions? You guys have any concerns about the direction we're headed?
A lot of work.
Can I also note another, change? The area, the section that was deleted, and that's 1041 regulations. You may have heard me talk about 1041 regulations in the past. And what those are is state statute allows local governments to put in place, they're called 1041 regulations. And what they are is essentially you as a town designate areas of state activities and interests that you want to have some control over. And one really great example is Highway 6. And so when you put those regulations in place, what you're doing is you're saying to, for those state activities and interests, is you're saying you have to come to us as a town and you have to file a permit, an application to get a 1041 permit. And so you have to go through a process. You have to get approval from us, VDOT, if you're making a change to your road. They were taken out because the state law requires a certain process in order to put the 1041 regulations in place. And you haven't followed that process through the county's regulations. So I don't want you to get in a situation where you were to adopt the county's regulations and enforce them, and then CDOT says, oh, well, these aren't enforceable because you didn't follow the process that's laid out in state statute before you adopt your own 1041 regulations.
Is it fair to say from a council perspective that adopting our 1041 ordinances is a high priority? And so guidance to staff would be, after we complete this process and Lindsay successfully eats this planning monster that he's taking on, that they'd be directed to start work on the 1041, and then after the 1041, probably the next one would be the nuisance ordinance. Is that fair, Lindsay? Is that something like, is that how you would prioritize?
Most certainly, those would be top ticket items with regards to the priority list that I intend on.
Is that fair guidance for?
When you say after he swallowed the planning, are you referring to after this action is completed and the comprehensive?
No, I'm talking about after he set up and able to now start receiving plans from the community. We then move on to the next step for the whole that we have, the
Yes,
immediate whole.
and I will need quite a bit of assistance from legal counsel with regards to that, and we'll probably bring in DOLA a little bit to help us, I guess.
Not the 1041 regulations.
Okay.
I know that Bob just did those in Blue River.
Perfect.
You guys know probably that Blue River Highway 9 was gonna get a cleanup station in Blue River. And so that's the reason that those 1041 regulations were adopted, is it was really a reaction to hearing that, oh, there's gonna be a chain-up station in our town with all these lights and all of this, and we wanna have a say as a community. So the ones in Blue River are probably in really pretty good shape to bring forward.
I'm gonna ask the question, if I may. Could we do it between first and second reading, or is it too much?
I don't know that answer. Yeah. I can look at it. And I'm not as familiar with the process. What you have to do with the council is you have to designate those areas of state activities of interest. And so that might be before an ordinance comes before you, is that you say, okay, we want to regulate state highways, we want to regulate water treatment plants, not that, you know, a lot of these issues are not going to affect you. Mining is another
We
area.
may choose to regulate, for instance, water distribution system
Mhm.
within the town.
Yeah.
Mhm. and sewer distribution systems within the town.
Major utility companies.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, the one thing that I feel pretty comfortable that we're not gonna need is airports. And, you know, I think we design review, there are more than one review over airports. I'm pretty sure we're not gonna need that one.
Can you tell your I put one, you ever see that one?
Well, they already got it.
It's scary.
What about when Keystone Resort wants to start a house game operation and,
Okay.
Speak better, say,
hey, if you're interested, that'd be cool.
it's a good one.
Kara,
No, I agree with your proposal.
all right. That's some direction as well.
Thank you very much.
Are there other questions on, the land development code? All right, let's move on to the bylaws then. And Mr. Town Manager?
I'm gonna defer to the author of the, bylaws, our town attorney.
Well, I have to give credit to Bob Weiner because he's really helping the town of Keystone a lot. So he really is the primary author of the bylaws. I want to say at the start that this is your document. This is town council's document. You can add to it, you can subtract from it, but this is what you're going to be working from as a group. And so it's something that you should be comfortable with and it's going to work for you. There are in the staff report, I identified several areas that I thought you might want to discuss further. And I'm sure there's more. You might have more questions. I'm not sure, Mayor, how you would like to handle this.
Do we think it would be constructive to start from just the beginning and just go through, maybe page by page? And then questions on each page and discussion on those? Is that acceptable to everybody? All right, so why don't we start out with page 1? This will be quick, they're all, no comments.
Oh, wait.
I know, page 2, or one that says town council meeting. Page 3, town council meetings, thank you. I was looking for page 2. Yes, Karen.
So currently, it says it meets at least once each month. And that would cover us. But is it closer to the intent of this council to say, twice a month, 2nd and 4th? We don't necessarily have to pin us to that, maybe twice a month except December. I'm not sure what the thought process here was, but I thought that's what we we're committed to.
Gretchen,
My thought would be, I think that's been our practice, is that we're meeting twice a month now, trying to get a whole lot of work done. I would like to see in a period of time, maybe a year, that we be able to go beyond some.
so
That was standard in my terms. What's that?
Well, it depends. It depends on the topic. It depends. Blue River meets once a month.
So by leaving it at once a month, it's least restrictive.
And I think
At
that's,
least once a month, so we could meet every week.
and I think that's what when we wrote the charter, we had this conversation and we wanted to make sure that we weren't forcing the group to meet a certain number of times that we may have to change later. So I think we kept it
That's valid.
at once, knowing that we would probably be meeting
Yeah.
more than that.
Right now, but
I think that's the conversation we had in the charter.
correct me if I'm wrong, if there is no meeting, no business to conduct, a meeting could still be canceled. So you could have months that both meetings were canceled because there was no business.
Yeah. Probably
We
not.
can't imagine.
I don't imagine that happening, so I just wanted to. All right. Other, I had one question, all right, it's on 21C. And we stated that the, meeting notice would be, it's the last sentence, would be delivered to reasonable customer means, including posting notice on public entry doors of the Keystone Center and posting on the town's website. I believe in the resolution that we passed, we indicated that the posting would occur in a binder at the entrance to the center. This would require something different than normal posting.
It would, I think the intent is to do it on the entry door so that somebody who is coming to your meeting can see right away that it's canceled because it's on the front door.
So this would be a one-off.
Yeah.
Emergency only,
Just for canceling for meetings.
Well, if we were canceled due to weather, then the building might not even be open,
and that's why I put it up.
That's fine.
right?
Makes sense. All right. Anything else on, page 3? Or Carol,
So if we have to reschedule, the mayor may reschedule it to another date or time. And this would be 2.1C. And then, of course, it suggests that we have to do it with sufficient notification to the public. Do we want to suggest that 24 hours is sufficient notification to the other members of the council? Should that be clarified so that we have time to respond to any change?
Where's the notification?
there is,
It's not
there's
there.
no
Okay,
notification.
we're adding it. I mean, this is talking about weather though. You might not have 24 hours to.
You're saying
cancel the meeting.
for the rescheduling.
For rescheduling.
Well, I may not be linking it to the right part, but there are several, I think there are several places where we could schedule it. And I
Do we,
wondered if out of courtesy for the council, we would have.
do we have a section, we have a section in here, I just don't remember where, that does talk about scheduling out of cycle meetings, which this would end up being at that point.
Well, and the open meetings law requires 24 hours notice.
Is that all we want for ourselves? Given that we might have to, maneuver schedules in order to be able to make it.
So you need to,
I'm asking my colleagues.
yeah,
I mean, the shorter the notice, the more people are gonna have more issues, but I mean, pretty sure that this group is going to try and make considerations for each other against the urgency of whatever you're trying to discuss, right?
The challenge would be if there was something urgent you wanted to get accomplished,
Oh, no,
that
that would
would drive.
emergencies would be
That
accepted, I
would,
guess.
so that would necessarily be an emergency. It wouldn't qualify as an emergency, but it may be urgent. For instance, I'll give you one example. If we had to cancel the April 23rd meeting for some reason because the land development code was on there, or cancel tonight's meeting for some reason because the first reading was on there and we have a timeline that drives us to April 22nd.
Yeah.
Then we would have to, that could cause the meeting to have to be called on very short notice versus longer.
Okay, so the default for ourselves will be 24 hours notice, just like the public, unless we can do better.
Yeah, and
Okay,
I would expect the mayor and the town manager to work together to give sufficient time.
I mean, that isn't at least 24 hours notice, right? So we
Yeah.
could.
Yeah.
if you're all
48, it
comfortable.
could be.
and also remember that quorum you need to meet. I mean, you can't meet without a quorum.
Yeah. But the objective would be to have as many council members
Yeah.
be able to attend as possible. Other questions on page 3? Page 4?
I have a question on page 4.
Yes, ma'am.
So I have a concern about this emergency meeting, 2.3A, that Jennifer, I was hoping you could kind of speak to, and it's mostly just this phrase that says, unless it's impractical. That's kind of throwing me, because it says, unless it's impractical, all members of the town council shall be notified of such meeting, and such meeting may be held if a quorum consents. That like makes me that's a nervous phrase to me. Because when I'm reading it, it sounds like on the request of 2 or more members of the town council with less than 24 hours notice, they can call an emergency meeting, with the town clerk, and then unless it's impractical, the members shall be notified. So if it's impractical, then 2 council members can hold an emergency meeting. Like, I mean,
You only have 4 to be a quorum.
No, no quorum required.
Yeah.
but there's no,
No quorum
For
required.
emergency meetings.
it's just, maybe I'm just like reading it weird, but it's just like.
How about me, let me just explain, so. To set the stage here, an emergency meeting can only be called in the event of immediate danger or threat to public health, welfare, peace, safety, or property. Or for, protection of those things. So we're talking maybe wildfire, COVID would be included in here. You know, some other natural disaster. I've never been involved in an emergency meeting. I talked to Bob about this. He's only had 1 emergency meeting in 30 years of practice. These are extremely rare situations, but there are going to be situations where if you need to meet, you got to meet. And so what if, some of your people are involved in this wildfire and you can't get in touch with them? I mean, that's where that language comes in, is that if you can't give notice to everybody, that's not gonna stop you from having this emergency meeting.
So what does the word verbiage mean that says, in such meetings will be held if a quorum consents?
So that is so say we can get a hold of everybody, we can get a hold of 7 of you. 4 of 7, which is a quorum, says yes, you can meet. 1 of the 7 says, but I can't be there. That's the circumstance that we're talking about, is that 4 of you say, that's your quorum, consents to the meeting. And then, but 1 can't be there.
So in other words, for a meeting to occur, at least 4 of the council members have to agree that that meeting should occur at that time,
Regardless of who can actually attend.
regardless of who can attend.
So do we need any verbiage in here to say that, I guess it's that town council shall be notified of such meeting? I feel like there should be language in there, if that's what we're going for, that says after appropriate attempts will be made to contact. I mean, you're still gonna try to call people, right? I mean, you're not just gonna say, oh, cool, we got 4 people, we don't need to call the rest. I mean, does there need to be language in there that you're gonna try to call people?
I don't want to put anything in there. I mean, you might want to.
It just
But
seems awkward.
I
It
want
seems weird.
to, I want to leave it up to, this is a dire situation where something is going on and you as a town council need to meet to discuss something. You can't give 24-hour notice. You've got to do it right away. I don't want you to be in violation of your bylaws for conducting business that is, for some reason, very emergent. You need to try to get some public assistance. I don't know. And because you didn't call somebody 3 times, you're in violation of the bylaws. And I don't know.
And here,
Here,
I just want to clarify my own mind. So you need quorum, a quorum to consent to have the meeting. And you drop down to section C, but you don't need a quorum to make any decisions.
Right.
Okay, although it's strongly desired.
One thing that you could do to this section to provide some peace of mind is you could require that action taken in an emergency meeting needs to be ratified at the next regular meeting of the town council. That's an option.
Presumably that's, it needs to be ratified in order to continue to be effective, because the reason for an emergency meeting would be for that immediate action to be in place until you have that meeting, right?
Yes.
I was gonna make the same point. If it's an emergency meeting, don't take emergency action, that's because it's got to take place in the prayer.
But you're time limiting it until, and reinforcing with ratification, or it's nullified at that
Yes.
point. That makes sense.
here,
But you're not leaving us in limbo until we can have one. I like that. I would urge us to adopt that.
is there consensus that we want to adopt that, in paragraph C, that, any action taken would require ratification at the next, regular council meeting? Or the next council meeting? All right. Does that quasi address your concerns?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I get why it's there. It just seems, I don't love it, but I get why it's there.
Yeah.
And the ratification thing definitely puts in a layer of checks and balances there that makes me more comfortable with the process that is uncomfortable by nature.
All right,
Can we do a 3-minute recess?
we are in recess for 5 minutes.
Thank you.
I, and I don't know if it needs to be in here, under work sessions. The charter says no quorum is required. There's no mention of that here. Do we need to mention that no quorum is required for a work session?
I think that would be a good idea. Sure. Yeah,
Can you add that?
yes.
We're on page 5.
And did we do that to avoid open meeting laws, so people could get together in a work session?
No,
No.
this isn't a work session. We're in a work session now.
Good. Why, what was the intent of that? I don't remember. the
Work
intent.
session?
Yeah, to avoid quorum.
It's not, well, because you could have a work session without all of the members here.
Okay, but certain people are working on some.
Yeah, if certain people have to work and are unable to attend, you can still have a work session.
Okay,
You could schedule a work session, I guess, at the CML conference.
Yeah.
And
because no action is taken.
no action can be taken.
But you wouldn't want to have to cancel a work session just because some people couldn't get there.
Right.
If the road was closed.
Got it, sorry.
But we couldn't make decisions in a meeting.
Right.
A question for Jennifer. We talked about this yesterday. Now, my concern was that I schedule work sessions as a matter of routine now before the regular meetings. So are we still all in alignment here? I can continue to do that without violating the other procedures here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I guess that's a question though, for all of you, do you want to add in a line that work sessions town council intends that work sessions are typically held before the regular meeting?
Unless the board is notified.
Yeah, or, I mean, it's just an intention, I don't know. You want to put that in there?
I don't think it's necessary.
Okay, and are we gonna have the same, do we need to put in anything about like reporting if we're not gonna be here for a work session? Does that need to be reported the same way as a absence or?
Well, that was a question later, when we talk about excused absences and absences.
If they the same policy?
We need to have that discussion.
He walked away. Were you expecting anybody? He didn't have food.
No,
They're back there.
He wasn't bringing work.
No food, okay.
I have a question on 28C. And the way this reads is that the way I read this is that if we have for instance, now we have meetings scheduled, we're planning meetings twice a month, second and fourth. If someone schedules a vacation in October, someone's at the door.
It's the same guy, I don't know when he's not going on there.
If someone schedules a vacation in October, after they know that this meeting exists, that they're supposed to, that this meeting, exists, and they're unable to attend, is that an excused absence?
That's, school calendar sometimes will dictate that.
Well, that's the question.
I think we need to add that caveat.
Well, that would mean that no one would ever be able to take more than take an application ever.
Yeah.
To have an excused absence,
No,
but the question is, there's nothing wrong with having an unexcused absence, as long as you don't have more than 3 in a year.
That justifies an unexcused absence. I think we need to put in something in regards to that personally.
All right?
What wording would you have?
Yeah.
Yes, we need, for Jennifer. I think it needs to not read that if it's in regards to what Ken just said. It can't be so rigid.
Well, isn't that though, vacations scheduled well in advance of a meeting would be an excused absence. That's a circumstance.
That's how I read it, but Ken thinks it.
The way I read it is that if you knew about the meeting and you scheduled a vacation, if you didn't know about the meeting and you had a vacation schedule, that's an excused absence. But if you knew about the meeting and scheduled a vacation, that was my question. Was it an excused absence? As a presiding officer, I'd like some guidance.
I think that the way it's written is a little bit ambiguous in that typically in practice, those are excused absence for other communities.
All right.
It seems like the key is the advance notice. It's an opportunity to say, I can't be there, I'll do what I need to do. Not to muddy the waters, but two different issues is excused or unexcused. There's also the option of remotely participating.
Well, we're gonna get to that.
Okay, good, because I want
That's here as well.
it's confusing.
So the interpretation right now that I will use is that if someone has a vacation planned in advance, we get advance notice, you're not gonna be here, that should be an excuse absence. Am I correct?
There are times when you can't really control the vacation. Yeah, and I think that's what your point is.
Well, that's why I asked the
Right,
question.
so this seems very, not necessarily ambiguous, but terribly restricted.
Oh, no, he's talking about making it more restricted, but I think it's being interpreted.
No, what I'm saying is the interpretation, I'll take the interpretation, that if someone has a vacation planned in advance of a meeting, say, in a month or 2 months, provides notification of that, that's gonna be an excused absence. That's,
Yeah.
I just want,
True.
that's the guidance I was looking
Yes.
for from
So,
council.
That's how it reads. My question back to you is,
I'm happy with that. I just wanted, as a guy making the first call, I didn't want walk in and make a call that's not, is contrary to the intent.
And if that is contested, then it goes to the council.
In the council book.
Yes.
Any council member can
Call.
object and then it goes to a vote.
I have a question on 2A-B.
Can we, no, hold on. So as it stands now, any vacation that any of us were to schedule that coincides with we're booked through December, it's gonna be automatically unexcused.
No, automatically.
Excused.
If you guys.
That was the original discussion, whether or not it should be or shouldn't be, and Ken clarified the interpretation, which was more lenient.
When you say that, one more time then.
If someone has a vacation schedule, for August, and, they just schedule a vacation for August, and we have a council meeting, and they provide advance notice, then that automatically will be an excused absence.
Okay, that's different than how I read it.
Yeah,
So.
I think it's a little bit unclear.
That way, it's unclear.
Yeah, and it's just because it's unforeseeable or unavoidable is the first line there, so I'll revise that.
All right. And the next item someone had was,
2.8B, so just directly above it. And it was just a quick question. I know we discussed 3 or more unexcused absences, but I didn't know if there was any sort of limit that we wanted to impose on excused absence. Like, is there a limit to where you can just have endless excused absences too?
I think it's hard to fill in on that.
I mean, I think in terms of number, that would be difficult, but is there a tone we can put in there that you're, expected to?
At some point,
I mean, if someone takes a 3-month vacation, they're gonna miss, like, at what point can we say excused interferes with the business of the council? Someone has, every month something comes up and it is excused, or they have a family illness or something, and you don't want to deny them that, like, at what point do we say it interferes with public business and needs to be addressed? Is there a tone in there that should be put?
That's tricky.
And I don't mean like, let's put intent, but.
There's several. And then they have vacation, or even if they didn't, if they were ill for a
I mean, that becomes habitual and then.
Right, so that's,
Something else.
that's where I'm questioning if there's something there that we should.
There's one line is if they're ill, you don't want them here, they don't want them.
Right, and you don't wanna say, oh, you only get 10, or, you don't wanna put a definitive line, but I'm wondering, we have a lot of options for excused absences, things happen. That's part of life, but we also need to function, and I don't know if there's a way to put a tone in there. Kind of addresses that need. Or not, if everyone's comfortable with it, it's fine, it's just, that was.
I go back to the discussion we had in the charter. And the concern I recognize, that one of the members of the council made during the session is that if someone, decided to vacation for 3 months this summer, we've now, by the interpretation we've had, Sarah pointed out, said that's okay.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the intent was so people weren't second homeowners living, Mariah is residents and living somewhere else for 6 months, 5 months of the year. They have to be present to be on
I
time.
understand it, but
How do we address that?
Can we address that? That's my question. Sorry. Sorry.
and,
And we had verbiage in the charter that was, the intent is for this, and the intent is for
Yeah.
that, without adhering to, strict
Yes.
legal
Yeah.
verbiage,
but the charter still applies.
So maybe it's an intent then.
Yeah, the charter still applies. This is just the process for approval.
So maybe we can just
I don't think,
Charter.
do you need to readdress what's in the charter here? Because the charter is the governing document of all
So if a question arises, it doesn't necessarily need to be written in here. We can just.
of it. Do we need something that says planned vacations that impact more than X number of council meetings may be considered unexcused?
And what's that X number?
I agree, two or three in a row. Basically, two would be a full month. Three would be, in other words, we're saying, if, for instance, my wife and I decided to take a round the world cruise and I'm gone for 6 months. That would not be cool.
But I'm very sure on a 6 weeks,
So-
you're okay.
So I'm hearing more than two in a row could be considered unexcused.
That,
But that still leaves some subjective decision making.
Right, we can keep it an A, you know.
Maybe they're
See.
deathly ill.
Yeah, right, that's, I
Yeah,
think.
with
we're
the
gonna bring it.
intent, do we need to include the intent?
no, what I'm saying is for vacations, illness, not illness, but for vacations, more than 2 council meetings in a row may be considered unexcused. Would something like that address your concern?
Yeah, and I like the May because, you know, there may be times of the year when, you know, 3 is fine or you know, whatever.
Or it may actually be a valid reason.
Yeah,
That it just happened that, and I said vacation, not
Yeah.
family emergency,
Right,
not
right.
illness.
so that still leaves
So
it
this is give you
flexible.
guidance,
Thank you.
leave a little bit of subjectivity as
Yeah.
required.
Yeah. It gives guidance to subjectivity, and it also gives the council an opportunity to come back and say, wait a minute. Yeah. Was it 2 or 3 we wanted?
But if somebody wants to propose.
You missed a lot.
Yeah.
Missed two.
That's one.
Yeah.
Would you like me to say 2 regular meetings?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So it comes into effect if the question is about the third one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not more than 2 regular meetings in a row, right? Okay.
Yeah, and if the council goes down to only having 1 meeting a month, that's- you're giving people 2 a month. You know, I mean, right, they have a meeting every other week, but.
If these bylaws prove to be insufficient and there's like a problem, we modify it.
And can be amended.
The amendment is just what,
And the problem probably won't vote affirmative on that.
Yeah.
but that'll only be one.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, thank you.
2, more than 2 in a row.
Okay.
Yes,
New topic.
yeah, go ahead. You talk, yes.
This is on the, remote participation. I didn't see this here. Maybe I've overlooked it, although I read it like 6 times. It's not there. Okay. Do we? 2.8. 2.8?
Hey,
Oh, unless a different form of.
Right, that's the point.
Okay.
Okay. But we don't address, do we need to address when it would be authorized? From my perspective, even if I were on vacation, I would want to take the opportunity for remote participation.
And I think,
Where is that 8? Is that on board?
I would say, God bless you for signing in, but I think participation would be next to impossible.
so I,
Is that?
Why?
It's very difficult, having attended the first months of the Charter Commission remotely. It's extremely difficult to do that.
We have that now.
We had video at those meetings at the Charter Commission as well, and it was still difficult.
I understand, but operating in the world we do now, it is very common to have mixed in-person and remote meetings. I've had multiples this week.
I'm not objecting to allowing the people to come in remotely and participate.
Right.
but the expectation is that people will be here in person.
Absolutely, but if you have an excuse,
Oh, then you can come in.
or you're ill.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's no problem with that.
And
No
full
problem with
participation, voting and everything.
that. What? Yeah,
Okay, that's very difficult.
if you had to vote, you'd vote.
But isn't it on the
But is there a
individual
problem with that?
to overcome the difficulty?
Well, I think it's upon us as a town to ensure that we have a sufficient IT infrastructure for modern participation.
You also have problems depending where they are with the infrastructure that they're dealing with.
We can't control.
I'm assuming,
Grateful.
maybe it's a very small question. If the infrastructure were there, if the technical situation on the individual and the town councils would support it, I would hate to limit somebody's participation.
But this, the way it reads, councilmen are expected to attend town council meetings in person unless a different form of attendance is authorized, or in-person attendance is excused.
So again, this is my question.
Yeah.
It's only related to, you're already excused, but you could.
You could.
Okay, got it.
Clarifying question, do we necessarily have to be specifically excused? You could specifically request, can I code this week, but I feel okay? Cool to attend remote, right? Wouldn't have to be a vacation, right?
Gretchen?
I would agree with that, but having worked at some of the tapes from this, it's really hard to clear in city.
But maybe a different question, are you proposing to go back to individual lights?
I'm not proposing anything, I'm just.
So I practically, right, I'm just reiterating Aaron's point that it is up to us, town council, to make sure that we have the IT support necessary for any resident to hear budget accountable.
What we're doing right now is, I'm not hard to follow.
So there's a couple of things here that you're talking about. One is remote attendance. That's one of the issues, remote attendance by a council member. And then the other thing is you can decide to allow that. I think the next question is what level of participation do you want to allow? And most communities have bylaws and then also have a separate policy that's related to participation, electronic participation in meetings. One of the areas that that there is some legal risk and legal concerns on is quasi-judicial matters. When you're acting as a judge and you are remote and you might not be able to participate in the same manner that people in person can participate in the meeting. There are some communities that say, if you're remote, you cannot vote on a quasi-judicial matter. Other communities say, fine, no big deal. But there are legal risks with that. Where you could be challenged because you weren't, you're not fully participating. Yes.
I would think that we as a 21st century town ought to commit to having a sufficient infrastructure where full participation would be possible, just as we would expect members to potentially be, or members of our community to be able to participate fully. And so if you can't have a meeting where your interactions are good enough to hear your community or a remote council member, then you couldn't expect them to vote. But we're a 21st century town, we're starting from scratch. We should be able to build the same level of IT support to allow that I see in the business world.
All I can say is even when you have decent infrastructure in conducting a meeting like this, it is difficult to remotely participate at the same level of participation that someone in the room has. And so that's, I would not be in favor of allowing routine participation by someone remotely. That should be an exception. here that will go around in order.
I hear definitely what you're saying. One of my own personal experiences, I don't know how to solve it, because I agree with the technology thing, but I think sometimes technology fails. I also think sometimes people fail. And we've seen that throughout COVID, when you're relying on someone who's in a position where they get to cast a very important vote to be attending and paying attention and present instead of maybe going and feeding a dog and putting it on mute. I question their level of, we've had an experience like that with the Charter Commission where I was very upset about someone's level of participation remotely and then their ability to cast a vote, because I questioned how much they had really attended to that meeting and how informed their vote was. So I think we need a higher level of accountability. That's just my opinion. I know what you're saying, but that's my opinion.
I recognize what you're saying. You've been all been to those meetings where you're talking to somebody and they're tuned out, they're not connected. But I think the town council, we have all made a commitment to this. It might be not, we don't know what's in somebody else's heart or what's going on. I absolutely concur with what Aaron says. So maybe what we want to consider is, what's the word, splitting the baby? The quasi judicial issue is, I recognize that you wrote in here that even if you are present for a quasi judicial meeting, you're not using your phone or some device to be able to contact somebody else. And that we cannot, absolutely cannot control in a remote situation. So maybe that's where we draw the line. No voting in a quasi judicial matter if remote.
But I believe the 22AA allows you to attend meetings as authorized in person. It authorizes you to attend meetings remotely.
Carolyn,
Attendance is different than, oh, yeah,
But
absolutely.
it also doesn't mean necessarily that meeting is excused.
No, separate issues. So, the, hypothetical I offered,
Oh, I can help, I think. We're gonna get to quasi judicial in that section a little bit later. And I'd recommend we address that attendance in the quasi judicial section. Right now, we're addressing excused absence. So
so my original question when we started this was, where in this bylaws would we address the question of whether someone who has an excused absence could participate, i.e. vote, not just attend?
if it's a quasi judicial matter, I think you address that in the quasi judicial section. If you're talking about attending non-quasi judicial, I think it's already covered in 2A.
Well, you've made a distinction between attending and participating in the votes.
She said some towns make that distinction.
She gave us those distinctions.
So I think it would be confusing to excuse somebody's absence and then allow them to attend the meeting remotely and allow that person to participate.
Why?
Well,
Well, at that point, if they no longer have an absence, they'd be attending.
yeah. They're just participating in the meeting fully.
Okay, so let's throw that hypothetical out and go here. Unless a different form of attendance is authorized, when might that happen?
So I think we wrote that in the charter for things like COVID, where we're all forced to be remote.
Right.
And we're not gonna say we can't. I think that was sort of the intention of that, is
Right.
we're forced remote.
Okay, so one person has COVID.
Or another COVID comes up and we no longer can meet as a body.
I'm not giving my word.
I think that's where that was originally birthed from, was that conversation of, you know, what if we can't? What if we just straight up not meet in person?
But could somebody say, I can't be here in person, may I have approval to attend remotely?
instead of asking for, an excused absence.
Right.
Yeah. If that's dressed.
Oh, well, that's simple.
Yeah.
Okay. So if someone were going to know that they cannot be here, they have an option of asking for an excusal or asking to participate remotely.
I don't,
Okay.
wasn't that, I don't
What?
get that, but.
Yeah, I think it's unclear. That's the intent. I don't think that's.
Go
And
ahead.
I don't think that was our intent.
But the question now is what is our intent?
Well, but the charter,
Charter.
Yes, it is.
the charter
I get that, but
reads this.
so I'm asking a question though, what does this or the charter say? If someone says, I just came off of pneumonia, I don't think I should be there, I want to participate remotely. It sounds like this is authorized, right?
It can be offered, can be offered.
Okay, make a suggestion, if you do want to go down that path and have authorized those situations, then maybe you want to consider putting a procedure in here as to when and how those would be authorized.
And to what extent?
Yeah,
Yeah.
What you don't want is it to be
It's regular.
a regular.
I get that.
thing.
Yeah, I agree with you.
and at last, we don't want, mayor, you don't want to get a call on Sunday night and somebody asks to participate remotely on the meeting on Tuesday, when you all haven't really discussed it.
Or,
I think,
or because I decided to go hiking on Tuesday morning and I'm gonna be in Steamboat.
Yeah.
That wasn't a planned vacation in advance.
Right. Which comes back.
That would be
to
an
that.
excuse.
I'm gonna ask one more, I don't know if you're gonna break.
Yeah.
But Karen,
I was gonna propose that our pizza is getting cold and that we eat and continue to work.
All right, let's see where the issues were. In the future here.
Yeah.
This is back, I should have known.
I think you all need to think about what your preference is.
Yeah.
So what?
We have to determine what we're
Leave it on us.
It's mentioned on the charter.
Everybody.
And then we're having a deep conversation.
Oh, yes.
Hungry. If I know where you're coming from and the rest of us are like, oh, it's hungry. Like, what is that?
Comment you made, Carol, now that your mouth is full. If someone requested to be authorized remote attendant, and for some reason that were to be denied in advance, that person could then request an excused absence. Right? So where were we? Well,
You still on page 5?
we're still on page 5, I have 2A. You see,
I have a quick.
oh, you're missing work sessions require an excuse.
Yeah,
But it doesn't count as an absence.
Right, that's, we're missing a work session. If you're unexcused, be an unexcused absence.
I don't think so. It's the same.
But we still need to compel people to want to attend work sessions, so I think you need to have some level of accountability and how much that is.
I mean, I think the bottom line is like, if we're gonna have work sessions before every single meeting, and we're meeting twice a month, you're talking a large time commitment past just attending what we wrote in the charter. Or what we have, and things are gonna come up. People are gonna have doctor's appointments. People are gonna have things where they can't attend, but they can attend the main meeting.
Well, what if they decided they just weren't a work session type of person?
Well, I guess that's a separate issue.
Maybe you don't want a work session, right?
but that goes to the habitual absence issue, right?
You have to be able to specify if we're going to discipline them for that.
We're taking a meeting that's going from 7 PM to 9 PM to everyone clearing from 4 o'clock to 9 PM as a regular meeting.
But that's something that even I think if the charter would recognize was probably pretty normal activity for town. The town work sessions are not the exception. Work sessions are predominantly the rule. Because it's the only opportunity we get to discuss them.
Right.
Really discuss items and give guidance before we see something coming to us for decisions.
But we are able to have work sessions that aren't back-to-back meetings too.
We could,
I mean, they're not written in stone that it has to be a 5-hour meeting. Right, you could have work sessions on a Monday or on previous Thursday or something.
that would be an interesting discussion. I know one member of the council which is probably objecting to that. All right,
I feel the eyes on me. I'm certainly finding it rough to suddenly be trying to find 4 days a month for council instead of 2.
I was talking about myself, not you.
I thought you were looking at me.
No, I'm just looking at you, it's my,
Perhaps we're in agreement.
so. But
So how do we compel that? Is the question.
if we even want to address it, and if it starts to become a problem, then we have to come back, and address it, amend the bylaw.
That seems useful.
Well, I think we need to decide whether we want to count it as an absence or not.
And the current wording doesn't refer to meetings.
I think
Right now, the current wording would count that if they didn't attend and didn't have a excused absence, it would be an unexcused absence.
Like if I wasn't able to attend the work session today, but I was able to attend the meeting tonight, would I be excused or unexcused? Or would you have both,
But you must
Where
know.
Well,
Yeah, or you must vote as a two. Where are we drawing the line?
that's the question. If, I would assume that there was a valid reason, as outlined above, it would be excused. But then it goes back to, if it's every week,
Right.
That certainly didn't meet the intent of what was intended for the charter. I don't know what the answer is, I'm just. In bylaws, can you legislate for everything? My guess is probably not.
No. No.
I heard a suggestion to maybe not include the work sessions under that rule. And if it becomes a problem, we readdress it.
I like that. You know, I mean, I think it's easier if we can stick to one day, twice a month. It's easier, but then you can work around it.
Oh, whatever I'm saying was work session would not be required.
But people have to come to the meeting anyway. I think most people will come to the work sessions most of the time. But if you have an issue where you're unable to get work done because people are chronically missing the work sessions, they aren't functioning as work sessions, then we come back as a group and discuss, all right, what does our requirement need to be? Rather investing all of our efforts now into trying to set rules around something that may likely not be a problem. Just talking about the audio.
Any thoughts? I'm almost would rather do the opposite.
Then what is your suggestion?
My suggestion would be work sessions, attendance is expected to be regular work sessions. If they're not, if they're not one of our 2 meetings a month, that they would not be considered a required attendance or required excuse. But if they were one of our 2, they would be, they would require an excuse. And if that becomes a problem, then we go back and readdress it as a council.
There's a compelling reason why you're missing it, you're going to get an excuse back from them anyway, so I think there's no harm in requiring them.
I think we should.
But I wouldn't count a work session as one unexcused absence and a meeting as one another. I think that's.
In the same day, in the same day.
Not, yes. Yeah.
So,
Your Maxwell, how do we do it?
the question, I'm just trying to roll with this a little bit as we go. You could add a under section 28B, you could add something that simply said, an unexcused absence from a work session and a council meeting scheduled on the same day would only count as one unexcused absence.
And again, it's no issue that's unexcused.
It's only an issue if it's unexcused. And all right, and that approach covered my concern because it said all council members expected to attend all regular, special, and study sessions unless excused. The only exception I would probably make to that is all regular.
All regular.
Regular meeting, regular work session, regular, yeah, regular and, regular council sessions and work sessions. So you're limited it. So in other words, if the council decided you were gonna have a meeting next week,
Are you at that emergency meeting in the wildfire, the people couldn't show up on Monday.
That'll teach you to volunteer to fight fires. It's safe. Is that okay with everybody? Did you get what? All right. In that case. Go ahead, Carol.
6, on 2.6, still on page 5. The last sentence says, appropriately, the intent is when feasible, town council will allow for a remote meeting option for the public's attendance at open meetings.
Yes.
We, of course, all concur that's part of our promise to our town. The question is, in my mind, there's a difference between attendance and participation. Are we going to specify that public comment or participation in a public hearing, quasi-judicial reasons, is also permitted remotely?
Are you talking about council members? Are you talking?
No. Okay, second homeowner wants to comment. Offhand, seems like that would be what we want.
But does that then mean that if for some reason that night, and I'm thinking of a specific Snake River Planning Commission meeting,
Yes.
that the technology didn't work?
Well, this is a when feasible. I think that covers us.
All right.
I think the intent is to allow public comment, right?
Well, does attendance mean full participation?
So one thing that would be helpful moving forward would be to put in place an electronic participation policy that speaks to public participation, speaks to, if you want, to council member attendance and participation. But typically, if you allow the public to watch and sit in on the meetings, most communities also allow public participation remotely. And the public should also be advised that there may be circumstances where that becomes difficult, challenging, and not possible.
That's all right.
So then why don't we just simply say public's attendance and participation at open meetings?
Well, that's what it says there.
No, it says attendance. I added the
Oh, you said, okay, got it.
participation. So,
I think that is where I'm going, right?
yeah.
Can we add, can I amend this to say, when appropriate? Like during anytime you ask the people in this room to participate, if they want to make a comment. But,
That would be participation.
right, when appropriate.
It's already dictated by the agenda and it's set out when we participate.
It's already, I'm not sure that adds.
Okay.
All right.
I think I was looking for the clarification about participation.
I guess I interpret attendance means they fully participate, but you know, I understand that.
Okay.
It was a good point.
I think we have asked for if anyone on that.
Yeah, we do,
Yeah.
we do have.
We had never bylaws before.
Um, Right. Are we ready for 6?
Yes.
All right, page 6. Anything? The only question I have is for the town attorney. Should we say that the town attorney, the attendance in meetings, in-person attendance is not required, but it may attend, remotely?
I think so.
No. Is that okay with everybody?
So that the town attorney can
Yeah.
attend remotely?
Would you care that?
3.9, it just doesn't, it just,
Do we?
shall attend on regular, of the town council and other meetings or sessions the council may request, and it be either in person or remotely.
So we defer to Jennifer, I still there, that's legally appropriate.
Oh, I think it's okay to add that. You also might want to change the word to shall, from shall to is typically required or something like that, because you might have a meeting that
Yeah.
has zero legal issues, no reason for a lawyer to attend, and you don't want to have the shall
Yeah.
requirement.
Yeah, I agree.
Which part of the will be?
That makes sense.
Just say it's typically required.
No, we may have a meeting, there's no need.
So maybe required if needed. Maybe required, is that happen?
Or just remove the shall
Remove the shall.
and attend such other meetings and sessions as town council may request.
Yeah.
Whatever the right verbiage is for that.
All right. Anything else on 6, 7? Richard?
On section 2.10A, the last sentence, meeting minutes need not record what was said during the meeting. I would suggest that we change need to should not. Why?
Is there a legal difference?
To me, need implies they could or could not. I don't want it recorded.
Well, this seems to be more a question of efficiency and administrative workload. And since the official record is the video recording, right? So,
There are some, and I'll give an example that was, I think was recently, it was on the Dillon thing, where a council member specifically asked to have their wording inserted in the record.
And that's in here. So that is included in here. And if you want it recorded, or if you want it in read in motions, you can. But I think as a practice, we should not.
Is there a legal ramification to the change of that word? Some of those words have funny meanings.
Well, to say meeting minutes should not record what was said during the meeting.
yeah.
Okay, now that you've said it,
What's the point in meeting minutes?
now that you've said it, I get it.
All right,
But in general.
Yes,
Right.
you're supposed to make a minute.
Can say that.
No.
When it comes down to we need not have. That's right.
all right,
So just leave it as a.
leave it as is. All right, anything else on,
Yes, okay.
anything else on, 6,
Oh, man.
page 7,
That was on page 7.
on 6, 7, anything else on 7? And one question on agendas. We passed a resolution, or there's nothing in here that talks about, the construction of agenda and who constructs the agendas. And I would recommend that we adopt the same language in here that we had in the resolution that we passed in the first meeting. Resolution 12, it simply says, the town council delegates to the mayor and the town manager the task of setting meeting agendas for regular special meetings, for work, sessions, regular special meetings and for work sessions of the town council. And then in addition, you also have the ability of any council member, any 2 council members can, request items on the agenda. Is that okay?
And
I'm looking at it 212.
Yep.
And wondering if this should be revised then as well. Maybe setting agendas and requesting future agendas is two different.
Those are two different topics.
Okay.
Anything on page 8?
2.13 of you guys?
Um,
It sounds great to me, Joe.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you won't have a motion just to extend.
Correct.
Yeah, I cringed at it, but then I thought about it. It's only fair to have the whole council have an opportunity to.
Just to put it out there, there are some communities who say, we end our meeting at this time. If we're not done by next time, then the items are continued to the next meeting.
Look at that.
Yeah, we can
If you do that, I would not be in favor.
How late did that, Dylan meeting go last week?
Good night, and it was.
When you have public comment, in cases like that, you're probably gonna have long nights on an issue like that.
And you can continue, I mean, the option is you can continue it.
But how long do you want to continue? How many different weeks do you want to continue? Particularly if it's quasi judicial.
And again, we have the ability to vote as a town council at 9, whether we want to continue with that. So we don't necessarily need to set that policy here, but if we were in the weeds on something and 9 o'clock, and he said, I propose a motion to go past 9, we could say, we don't agree.
Okay. I think we may see that tonight. So everyone's okay with 213? You don't look okay. All right, page 9. Or page 10.
Oh, gotta figure out. Okay, we talked about, oh, it is on page 10. Isn't that nice?
Page 10.
3.10 delta. Unreasonable destruction. I propose that we add a fifth rationale for calling something disruptive. And that would be about comments that are about topics unrelated to the town authority or the town business. Which happens, as we know. And I would like us to have an opportunity to say, your comments are being disruptive to the business at hand.
Jennifer?
So that gets into First Amendment issues.
Well, we have a purpose.
You do. You do.
We clarify the purpose up front. We clarify the guidelines for speaking. You're not, you propose that repeated speaking is not a First Amendment, and I'm proposing that we address the question of people who come here with completely alternative agendas. Who might?
So, your communications to council, your public comments on any topic that's not on the agenda, you can't really do that. You can't say, you can't limit it to things that council has control over. You've opened this up as a forum, a public forum under the First Amendment, and you really have to allow speech on anything, and it can be on things that are very uncomfortable that you don't like. I mean, people have brought First Amendment claims about this.
So your legal advice is we have to let them go for 3 minutes.
Yep.
Yes,
Just sit through it.
yep,
and hope the next person is not gonna pick it up and do it sooner.
And you can have decorum rules and the presiding officer can say, you know, you're not being respectful, I want you to be respectful. But where this comes into play is where you have an officer then remove somebody from the podium. That's where it comes into play.
But actually, we have no. This says in 3.2 Delta that continued disruption may subject the person to removal from meeting. And my question was, how about you?
You have a police officer that would take that thing.
Call the ethics file.
So you have to anticipate
No,
the problem or call 911.
you'd have to call your police department.
Okay.
And they're sometimes, you know, you might get to a situation where you know the meeting is gonna be very contentious, maybe you're gonna have police at that meeting. Other communities have police at every single meeting.
Okay. Let's hope for the best.
By the way, I appreciated the article you sent out to us.
Yeah.
All right, anything else on page 10? Page 11. Anything on page 11? Anything on page? Oh,
Is there ever a time when an ordinance is passed after the first reading?
No, well, emergency order.
Okay, only that, because sometimes the reading throws me off when it says, if the ordinance is passed at first reading, which I believe means if it's passed to go to the second reading, right? Which is, yeah, you gotta understand that.
Right.
Right, thanks.
Nothing on page 11? Page 12?
Yes, final question, unrelated to page 12. Because I think page 12 is it, right?
No, page 13 is it. And
Oh, is that the sign off?
anything on 13, it has amendments. Anything on page 13? All right, now, Sarah.
Final question. I know we discussed a lot in the past about having an ethics code, and I was wondering if we were missing that from this, if this is a separate document, because I would really like to see an ethics guideline.
Okay,
I didn't
This
know
is
if
separate?
was appropriate, okay.
this is separate. One of the questions that I was thinking that you might all ask is, well, what happens if we have a violation of the bylaws? And what do you do? But that could be in your code of ethics.
Okay, so that'll be entirely separate.
It'll be separate.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be separate.
Can we lay out in what period of time we have to do that?
I think it's April 2026.
Yeah, it's like 2 years. But sooner, would be better.
Yeah, I was looking to see it. When I quickly knew that that was not part of it, and so I just wanted to bring it back up.
All right, any other questions? Any other guidance we'd like to give council? In that case, is there anything else we would like to discuss in the work session?
I have a follow-up question on this. So what would you like for next steps on this? You want me to make revisions? You want it to come back to another work session? How, it needs to be approved by resolution, so at a regular meeting.
I think this was an adequate discussion point. So if you were to take our recommendations and guidance, let's see it one more time before I vote.
Well, what do you say? Can we bring it back for a vote?
That's right.
Yeah, we
We
can one
can
more
see
time.
it and
Yeah.
then be ready.
Okay.
It would probably be a consent vote,
No,
right? No,
not necessarily.
could be though.
We could put it on a discussion, continued business as a resolution. And so if you would have questions and you want, further discussion on it, we could do it that way.
Right.
And
If I think of something
if
else.
there were changes that made, if we disagreed with
Okay,
the changes, there'd be an opportunity to make an amendment to it, and you could then still vote on it.
Thank you.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right, anything else?
We were going to talk about membership representation.
Oh, yes, Gary.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And this is just really a follow-up to our discussion at the last meeting where I didn't have a lot of this information, but now I have it. So, you know, you can read through it. I'm not gonna go through these one by one, but there's the various boards, commissions, you know, I try to give you the frequency of meetings, who they suggest be on the boards. Most of them include elected officials, others also include appointed officials. Try to do the meeting dates and times and places. As I recall at the last meeting, I think Dan raised his hand for the Council of Governments meeting, I believe.
Yes,
And there was a couple others that I failed to look up today. Can you remember, Maddie or Ken,
I think, yeah.
I need a list.
good.
who's that?
What, I need.
Oh, yeah.
Valerie says the third.
So do you want me to read them all?
Yes.
Past, the mayor and town manager. CNO, we had not designated.
Normally that would be the mayor and the town manager.
Okay. And then the I-70 coalition was, the primary would be Aaron and the alternate would be Valerie. The Intermountain Transportation, which is IMTPR East, we did not designate. Northwest Cog, Dan, town manager, you may have already said that, sorry. The Summit Chamber, we hadn't designated. Summit Housing Authority, Gretchen and Valerie. Summit
Until the town manager takes over.
until the town manager takes over. Summit Stage and the Transit Board, we did not designate. The school district town manager meeting, which I don't know what the official title of that meeting is, question mark town manager, because we didn't want a town council member. And then Vail Resorts meetings, the town manager and mayor would meet monthly, and then once a month, he would meet with rotating town council members. And
That's
So there's Open Space Advisory Committee on here that we did not discuss the last time. I think that's the one new one that
where's
sort of
that
popped up.
list?
It's in the packet.
It's in fact,
It's in the work agenda.
The one.
I'd be interested in that.
So shall we just, identify interests?
yeah, identify it.
For interests, I'd be interested in the Intermountain Transportation Planning and the Chamber.
Perfect, those are two that didn't have representation.
Did I miss, so the only one I missed was the open space one?
Space.
CDOT.
We don't get to appoint ourselves to that, but you see how it works. The county appoints the representatives. There are representatives from each of the planning basins. Terry Craig and John Hoopman are designees at this point. The meetings are always open and they're actually really interesting meetings to sit in on. But if you want to be on the board, there's going to be new appointments made in December and there'll be an application process. So I think anyone interested in one, I would recommend they start attending a couple of these meetings, or, kind of feel it out.
What are those?
The open space.
Yeah.
As we said.
I'm sure it's on the county website.
The meetings,
Yeah, when they are.
I didn't put it in there. They're pretty much monthly, as I recall, but, and they're always over at the county commons building.
And anyone can attend the CDOT meetings.
Get with the county?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's no appointment necessary. I just want to make sure you knew when those are scheduled.
So if we are interested in these, do you send us our email on behalf of the town? Because you just call and say, yo, here.
I think, well, you said the I-second coalition, Intermountain one, we would need to make that appointment. I could draw something up saying at the meeting that the board appointed to this group and we start attending. Same with council, I mean, all these, we'll notify those organizations who have been appointed. Yeah.
I just Googled OSAC, they meet the first Wednesday of each month. It was just a.
Is that open space?
Yeah.
What's that? Yeah, Open Space Advisory Committee. So, Carol, did you want the council giving you a thumbs up?
Which one are you asking?
The
Intermountain transportation.
Yes, I'm proposing it. Y'all concur?
Oh, it's way down in gypsum.
For the next one.
We could,
I was gonna ask, do they have any of those remote, like the intermodal, is that a potential to be a remote attendance?
I didn't get that. There was one that said they did allow that, but other than that, they, I believe it's set up just for in person. I don't know that they have the tech equipment to set up the remote. So we have that down. Manny, do you have that? Did you get it? Okay, good. So we'll make contact with those organizations, indicate who our reps are going to be. There's some alternates here we can still put in there, by the way. If we don't have an alternate, that's, not gonna kill anything now.
What do we need to know, which one?
Yeah, Ken, the next one's in Durango in August and then Jackson. There's a couple of trips.
I-70 coalition.
I-70 had it, we had Aaron and Valley,
Oh, okay, good.
and then Northwest Cog was Dan and myself. Intermountain was Carol, and we didn't have a backup there, I don't think. The second person. And maybe we want to leave that for the public works director when the public works director comes on, because it's gonna be closely tied to I-70. This is the government meeting that deals with all of the roads. And the lobbying organization of the town that deal with the roads are the I-70 coalition. And normally the public works director, I think, would be the guy who would be.
I think that's a good call, yeah.
The housing authority was Griffin. And
Until
then,
we have a
until we have
town
a
manager, clear that's the person that's in the line.
and then, CDOT meetings were open, mayor and town manager for CML and OSAC. And we'll begin attending.
Yeah.
You may want to talk to John Ubin, he lives over in, I think John lives in, Estates and Alders or over in Alders area. He's a current member.
I guess I'll need him there unless someone has his contact.
I may just happen to have that contact.
Excellent.
In fact, you
I
have,
don't know if I have it, I think you, Steve.
all right.
I have on my list something called SCTC, but I didn't write what it was.
Well, is that the cable TV?
Yes.
Yeah, you know, I came up with that something.
Right.
I think that's staffed pretty much by the town managers. They work, there's money from cable franchises that help fund that television and filming and stuff.
If we like to participate in that,
Pardon?
if we like to participate,
You like to participate now?
if we elect to participate. I think was that the right words?
Yeah.
We're anticipating we probably will. That comes out. All right. Is there any other representation we need anywhere?
To get me to the chamber,
Okay.
to get me to the chamber,
I still hear you.
chamber of commerce.
Oh, yeah,
Carol would like, is gonna do the chamber. Is anyone else, would anyone else like to do the chamber?
I'll do the chamber.
Gretchen as well. All right. If there's nothing else, and that doesn't preclude the staff or town manager from participating in any of these. We can set you up for meetings.
this town manager doesn't have a.
Okay. All right, with that,
Present company.
I think we've completed the agenda items. Is there anything else we'd like to discuss? In that case, this meeting is adjourned and we will adjourn, we will come into the regular meeting in 10 minutes.